Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to some of us that joined from Canada. On behalf of CFA Society Bulgaria, let me welcome you to our webinar. My name is Stefanova, and I'm CFO of Fremach Bulgaria. I have been a board member of CFA Society Bulgaria since late 2023. And I will be the host of the webinar today. The board of CFA Society Bulgaria has decided to start a series of webinars as part of our strategy to promote integrity and viability of the financial industry and to improve professional competence of our members. Today, we will focus on ESG impact on financial strategies. I will first present the three speakers that I have. Two of them are here in the studio. I would like to welcome first Dr. Marina Stefanova. Dr. Marina Stefanova, welcome.
Thank you so much.
She's Vice Dean Sustainability, Empowerment and Engagement with Sofia University. She's acting as EU Pact Ambassador with ES, European Commission, and she's visiting professor at Technical University Freiburg. Dr. Marina Stefanova has been pivotal in educating ESG consultants in Bulgaria and chairs the Bulgarian Sustainability Specialist Association. Next to her, I have Mr. Boyan Rashev. Welcome. He is a sustainability practitioner mostly involved in environmental and resource management. Since 2007, Boyan has been a managing partner at Denkstat, the most experienced advisory on natural and social capital in Bulgaria. Boyan has 20 years of work experience in the fields of environmental management and corporate sustainability. Since March 2020, he has been an active investor focusing on the commodity sector. This has been so successful that in September 2022, his personal portfolio became the foundation of a mutual fund. Welcome, Boyan. And from Canada, Dr. Richard Norris. Hello, Richard. Dr. Richard Norris has over 30 years energy-related experience in both industry and finance, in debt and equity. Richard has worked in engineering, management, and board roles covering Africa, Europe, former Soviet Union, and South America with BP, Alpha Aquitaine, Total, Geopetrol, Candax Energy, and Eland Oil and Gas. Richard was instrumental in building the European Oil and Gas Structured Finance Group at BNP Paribas. He's a fellow of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and holds Master in Petroleum Geology and a PhD in Petroleum Engineering. Richard is a non-executive director of the Canadian listed Marina Energy, where he is a chairman of the Sustainability Committee. He's also a non-executive director of the Swedish listed Maha Energy AB. Welcome, Richard, and I'm really very pleased to have those three eminent speakers next to me. So before we start, I would like to let the audience know that you can ask questions on the line using the Q&A function, and we are going to reserve some time at the end of the webinar. Overall webinar should be 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we envisage about 30 minutes Q&A at the end. So, Ms. Marina Stefanova, can you please outline the ESG market in Bulgaria and emphasize on how ESG relies with the competitiveness of the companies?
So first, thank you for inviting me here in the studio with this prominent audience. So we don't see them, but we know they're there, and they will continue listening or watching this webinar after the recording. So welcome all. Second, thank you for putting me opening the debate, because I believe that this is a very good company to discuss the topics of environmental, social, and governance impact on companies and how they behave and what are the effects on the market and in society of their behavior. So what is the current state of art in Bulgaria related to sustainability? I would just start outlining the landscape, and then I believe that we will go further in the discussion. You started the question very well, because sooner or later, for us, I would say, like specialists, since the beginning, sustainability was always in the heart of competitiveness of any company. So if you really would love to plan in a long-term period, your I would say performance, and then capitals, and then human resources, and then markets and development, you need to have this long-term view. Following this, we were really insisting, and I'm saying we because we know with Boyan and the company he has and all the consultants with him he was working during these years, we were focusing and keeping really the emphasis on relating very closely the sustainability to competitiveness. It was only recently that we started seeing more and more of this interference of the legislation initiatives, the normative regulation, and the compliance movement coming for companies and trying to engage more companies from beyond the borders of the companies who have already recognized sustainability as a leading business model advantage. I'm not speaking about marketing, not PR. I'm talking about business model advantage. For this, I would really like to congratulate the efforts of the European Commission starting the dialogue and putting it on the level of regulation, because it was needed as a first or as a next step of being able to put some of the main instruments that sustainability is using, like science, to transform the business model of the companies, and this is the materiality. Especially the model of double materiality was something that companies were expected to use during all these years, and now through normative requirement to be able to really reevaluate what is relevant for them, financially relevant or material, and what is not. So I would say that through this scanning and through this diagnosis, or I would say not diagnosis, but status, companies were able to see what is their starting point to the journey of sustainability and go further. Well, what we can see now is that in Bulgaria and half of the countries in the European Union, we have a landscape which focused and transformed part of the regulation related, let me emphasize, related only to reporting. So reporting and auditing were embedded, and I would say they are embedded in Bulgaria, in the Bulgarian legislation. Nevertheless, these are postponement. We can see the postponement of 1 year for some companies, next year for next level of companies. But the discussion, this was almost 3 years of discussion, of bringing together experts and also representatives of companies together with the state authorities to be able to build this infrastructure. It was a next level of development of the ecosystem that we already know, but it was random and it was scarce if you look at it from a societal development perspective. So for me, it was a good step forward. What happens now is that we are really deep diving into the implementation of this legislation and this normative regulation, and we see many of the bottlenecks from things which are really necessary. So probably after this discussion, they will stay. And from some of the things which are not necessary to be overregulated, and some of them will probably be delayed or will be dismissed as all. I'm really happy, and this is something that we, again, we can highlight through the development of the sustainability as a movement and then as a management approach all over the world is usually something which differs every competitiveness thinking, because in the competitive economy, we see ourselves as competitors. And here, speaking about sustainability, we usually see ourselves as collaborators. So nevertheless, which were the international bodies or the international associations, the technical committees were always working together. We were speaking about stock exchanges, or we were speaking about voluntary regulations or standards for reporting or for implementation, philosophy or business ethics, or practitioners working in the same industry. So this collaborative approach is really consistent with the dynamic of the development of sustainability and facing, being able to use as a purposeful tool for the companies to be able to meet these global risks or individual risks. Nevertheless, they're physical, financial, non-financial when we speak about environment, social, and governance. So going on this direction, I think that we're on the appropriate time. I don't see us really going in the speed that is necessary from the challenge that we are facing. But I see it as a momentum that we should not miss by thinking that we can delay. We are delaying some of the legislation, but we are not delaying the problems. The problems and the challenges are coming, and for me, only the overregulation being postponed means that we have still more time to work on the real deal, where we can find sustainability as a place in the bottom line of the company, and not something like a sideline, either reporting or this kind of, I don't know, compliance, if you go to the supply chain where reporting is still not compulsory.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for these insights. And can we say that Bulgarian companies have adopted, or how many of them have adopted already ESG reporting? Do we have a kind of statistics so that we understand where is currently Bulgarian market in terms of ESG sustainability?
So let me just go a little bit behind, because it is something that it is not just a brand new reporting. This non-financial reporting was already introduced in the Bulgarian legislation and at European level with the non-financial directive 2014. So it was implemented in Bulgaria 2017, starting from there. So the first way for the largest companies which are publicly listed or of public interest, they were already obliged to report. So they started building some of their structures within gathering data, non-financial data, and putting it into some kind of a report structure, which we were calling non-financial declaration. I would say that it was just for the companies who were not performing sustainability related, neither strategy nor activities, nor putting resources and trying to increase their positive impact or decrease their negative impact on their own companies and also the society that they were working. It is something strange, and it stands like a separate annex to the report that they can see, or they were delivering during these 5 years. After the CSRD draft, and then the ESRS, the reporting standards, again draft, we saw that many of these companies, because it was compulsory, they started really going through the standardization of the data and the structure of the reports. They were starting seeing the gaps in their business models. So for me, for the majority of the companies who didn't put sustainability as a business model in their beginning, it was a very healthy exercise, which was a little bit painful for them, because all the wording, all the questions or the primary data was something they didn't understand why we need to deliver on this data. So for the smaller minority of the companies who already have done the choice to go to the sustainability road, for them it was just an upgrade. Some of them are either even hiding some of the data because they were over delivering data for their stakeholders during the previous years. So for me, we are having a very good start. 2023 was something that we just closed a research with the Bulgarian Stock Exchange related on the non-financial disclosure of information of companies who were obliged as a first wave to go there. We can see that there are some gaps, but looking at the overall state with the delivery of the information, we can do it. What about, and my question would be, what about the state of the competitiveness and sustainability of the companies themselves? Because one is reporting data, what is happening in the company, and the other is managing the data and putting the strategy behind it, where you need to go further using sustainability as a tool for resilience, for competitiveness, or even growth. Yeah.
Yes, thanks. I think that Boyan would like here to come with some ideas and some data regarding the compliance and sustainable business in terms of corporate strategy.
Hi, everybody. I don't really intend to go into data or some statistics. What I can say, coming out of my experience as a consultant, until we were selling sustainability services to companies who wanted to do something, I had very nice discussions with the CEOs and with everybody who was on the other side. The discussions were about how to be better, how to create more value for society, how to decrease environmental impact, and then a report on it based on the GRI, the existing global, the global reporting initiative. Now I have to admit that discussions changed dramatically in the last 2 years when the wave of companies that didn't really want to do anything in this direction had to do something. Then our clients call me and tell me, Boyan, can you help me with this ESG shit? Yeah, so this is the type of discussion that comes now. Why is this happening? I want to start from a little bit, earlier. It's very interesting to listen to us. We are talking about sustainability all the time. ESG is a term that became very modern and now is a kind of curse word very fast among top executives. Why is it like this? Because sustainability is a more or less defined concept where you need, from corporate point of view, what is sustainability? To perform, grow, deliver profits to shareholders in the long term. And to be able to do this, you need to somehow satisfy the ever-evolving expectations of stakeholders. They are related to environmental impact, to social impacts, and stuff like this. ESG, on the other side, is a specific framework which is used to assess environmental, social, and governance performance. And this framework does not really depend on you as a company. It depends on somebody who decided something, either a politician or a ratings agency. Yeah? So, and this framework changes in time based on the politically strong, views at this time. And this creates friction among companies. I will give you some examples. Earlier, Dow Jones Sustainability Index was the top, index, the top measurement of ESG performance before, the coming of many new indexes in the last 2-3 years. If you look back into Dow Jones Sustainability Index, I don't know, I give you just 3 examples. September 2015, Dow Jones Sustainability Index declares Volkswagen the most sustainable automotive group. 1 month later, October 2015, the diesel scandal. And the whole sustainability of Volkswagen disappears. So they are getting deleted from Dow Jones Sustainability Index. British Petroleum, 2009, the most sustainable oil and gas company. 2010, Deepwater Horizon, BP is deleted from the index. And now BP is a company that is actually dying. They are going to be bought by somebody, by the big fishes, who actually never went into this direction too much, either by Exxon, by Chevron, or by Shell, somebody with lots of money. Nokia used to be declared the top sustainability company in the high-tech industry, 2009. The same year, 2009, their share price went down 70% because of iPhone. So Nokia actually disappeared after being declared the most sustainable company. Same with Kodak, by the way. So you see, the idea of the ESG framework is to somehow measure performance in terms of sustainability. But obviously, there is some contradiction that leads to wrong results. And the contradiction comes from the fact that ESG frameworks come from somewhere outside. If a company decides what is sustainability for themselves, then they look at their basic morale. The basic morale of the management defines sustainability for a company. Do the right thing just because you know that you can be successful in the long term if you do the right thing. Then look at the most important stakeholders around you. They will tell you what they need. Now, you don't need to ask Brussels to tell you what they need. And at the end of the day, the path to sustainability is very, very individual for every single company. But the fact is, giving into ESG requirements, which are, modern political ideas or the push by some NGOs who are very strong, this might lead to wrong results. And at the end of the day, what you want to do, you want to deliver, you want to be able to have products and services that your clients want to buy. This makes you stronger, in the long term. You want to be able to, sustain the business, change it so that you attract the bright people to work for you. But in order to attract these people, you need to show commitment to some values, because currently young people, they want to see that you do something good for the environment and stuff like this. So it's a very individual path. And as an advisor, I always like to work with a client that wants to achieve something, but is not, pushed to achieve something.
It's, let's say that you're going to the practical side of the sustainability in terms of strategy. And it was well informed, the whole policy for the ESG and sustainability was based to the fact that it is going to evoke a lot of new opportunities on the market. And that different sustainability goals and strategies can actually attract a lot of new investments, and there are new opportunities. So do you still think that these sustainability strategies can be positive for the investment in terms of, one way is the corporate itself, if it is positioned as a sustainable company, and on the other hand, in terms of, for example, asset management or bank that is going to finance sustainability business?
Sustainability strategies, of course, can be beneficial for investment. This is, any strategy that is not beneficial for investment is not sustainable. So I don't know how to answer the question. Of course, here we need to have in mind that lots of so-called sustainability actions or measures, they get supported by the government with subsidies or any type of support, and this can lead to distortions, and we see it on the energy market, for example. It's very clear. So I would say any sustainability strategy that can be self-sufficient and makes money in the long term is sustainable. So it should be able to attract investment. But there is this tendency in the investment world that companies are kind of ranked based on the ESG ratings, and the ESG rating sometimes can give you a very, very wrong idea of what is going on with a company. So I think, people should not forget the basic financial metrics, first of all. And then people should really concentrate on what they know is critical for this company on the specific market in terms of environmental or social issues, not on general ratings.
Okay, and do you have any in Bulgaria, for example? Then we compare, we stick a little bit to the Bulgarian market, and then we'll try to have a little bit global overview to expand a little bit. What are the sustainability companies in Bulgaria in terms of at least financing? Is this financing already reflected in some financial instrument, in some financial institutions? Are they attracted? Is this a competitive edge to be sustainable, for example, to attract new financing?
Yes, because in Bulgaria, if you are a big company, you want to attract financing. Companies in Bulgaria usually look first at potential grants. so you need to do something in direction of sustainability in order to attract financing. Then they look into the European Investment Bank or the EBRD or this kind of banks that are cheaper, sources of financing. And I have many examples with clients where they had to change their projects or the way they are managed based on the EBRD environmental and social policy. And this change, later they saw that it makes sense actually for them. It helped them with local stakeholders. It helped them with institutions. So there is a tendency like this, but on the pure financial market, the private market, I can't really say. In Bulgaria, not many companies have ESG ratings or something like this. Only companies that are listed on the international stock exchanges somewhere. In the companies listed on the Bulgarian stock exchange, this is a future for them still. It's under development, actually. The stock exchange is developing something. So this will come.
Okay, let's include Richard with a little bit global view with his experience. Richard, you heard a little bit of local perspective. So please tell us, what do you think about actually how to relate this with US and Europe currently?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me here. And I appreciate everybody doing this in English, because I suspect you might not be doing it in English if I wasn't here. So thank you for that. My Bulgarian's not up to this. I prepared some slides, but before I open those up, I'd just like to pick up on a couple of comments from previous speakers, which I thought were very excellent contributions and very relevant. Is that Dr. Stefanova said that there's a discussion around regulation at the moment, what is practical and where there may be over-regulation, and that's a theme I'm probably going to talk about a little bit. And also the point that ESG is basic to a company. Companies do this anyway, and the question about how much regulation is needed and how that creates unintended consequences and distortions. You also asked me to talk a little bit about decarbonisation rather than just sustainability as on its own. So if I may, I'll put up my slides now, if I can find them. I'm not actually sure how this is going to work, but let's see. Right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, now I don't know how to navigate, but I'm not sure it's going to work or not. That's going to be annoying. I may have to do it in the PowerPoint. Hold on one second. Yeah, there we go. So I've just titled this Energy Security and Growth, just to perhaps undermine a little bit the question of what ESG really is. I come from a background in energy, and I probably forgot to mention in my bio that I also work as a fellow of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, which is a defense think tank. But within that sort of traditional defense structure, we also talk a lot about energy security. Now, as you may know, I'm British, but I live in Canada, and on my LinkedIn profile, I put rather disingenuously that I'm an energy refugee. I think the energy policy in the UK and probably in Europe is so catastrophic that when my wife said, "Why don't we move to Canada?" I put my hand up and said, "Yes, absolutely." Canada has 200 years worth of absolutely everything: oil, gas, uranium, critical minerals, fresh water, food. It does have America as its southern neighbor, which has become a bit more challenging recently. But when I look at what's happening in my home country in England, I actually think it's very dangerous because there is no energy policy. There's a decarbonisation policy. And as the investor Lynn Alden has said, if your government policies are against energy density, basically what will happen is you will diminish your share of the world's economic output. You will basically make yourself poorer and irrelevant, and the rest of the world will move on without you. So we should be thinking about a little bit is what we do, and whether that's in Bulgaria or Canada. It's also worth remembering that half of the world's population lives in a small circle centered on Southeast China. And what they do is going to be perhaps more important. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do things, but we just need to keep the perspective. And something we'll come back to later again when it comes to energy, sustainability and politics is that if there's a battle between physics and platitudes, between how the world is and how the world we would like it to be, physics is always going to win. So I'm going to start off with this, which is probably something many people will have seen. This was around on social media a lot. And a lot of people like this, and I have to say it annoys me. And the reason it annoys me is that it is only half the story. This is a classic false dichotomy where we have just two possible outcomes, and it denies the fact there may be another outcome. So what they're saying is we've got climate change is real and urgent, and we do all of these ESG kind of things, and we make a better world. And the joke being that if climate change isn't real or urgent, we still get a better world. Well, to my mind, the bit that's missing from this is that it presupposes that everything we do, particularly around the energy transition and decarbonisation, is successful. And I will come back to what I mean by successful in a moment. If we have an alternative scenario, which is that the energy transition is unsuccessful, and by this I mean that we do not simply replace fossil fuels with low carbon alternatives and have exactly the same lifestyles. We replace fossil fuels with low carbon alternatives and we have less energy and we make ourselves poorer. What happens in that case is we still have the same two different contexts, but we end up making a worse world or a much worse world. And the idea being that if we have a lot less surplus energy and energy becomes more expensive, we are going to be less able to adapt to climate change, which is why it would be worse. So as I talk through this, and I think for today's discussion, we should keep in mind this idea of Milton Friedman that it is a mistake to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. And I think this is something we're going to see a lot in ESG and sustainability, is that the intentions are almost always very good, but the results are not always what we expect. So some examples of that, excuse me. BP, who was mentioned earlier, they had to decarbonize, and one of the best ways of doing that was selling their most dirty assets. So they sold their Alaskan oil business to a private company called Hillcorp, who then went ahead, deployed money into it, and its emissions went up. So those emissions, they came off BP's balance sheet and its sustainability rating went up, but they didn't go away. This wasn't a fix. And the same thing happens on a more general level, that as we squeeze oil companies by defunding them, typically they will sell their assets to Chinese, Indian, many other companies who will be very grateful to pick up these assets cheaply and just go ahead and carry on the same way. And this is where, we've seen this, we didn't mention this, but I used to work with Desi at BNP Paribas. And we did a lot of oil and gas lending. And in about 2016, that entire group was shut down because of the pressure on from the shareholders on BNP to stop funding. And this happened to all the banks. So what's happened is the cost of capital for oil and gas companies has gone up, both on the equity side and the debt side. And there's some very good outcomes to that. It means that they are extremely focused on good ROI projects, and they don't run around spending money on silly things. But in the meantime, since that happened, it's very clear that oil demand has not gone down. We're squeezing supply and demand is going up. So at some point that is going to break and we're going to see very high oil prices again. And in terms of the funding, well, on the complete flip side, oil and gas has had extremely expensive funding and has been very disciplined. On the renewable energy side, money has been free. We've had very low interest rates for a long time, plus enormous amounts of subsidies. And that means that money gets thrown at any stupid project, and there are some really stupid ones out there. There are some sensible ones, but there are a lot which are attracting huge amounts of money. Climeworks was in the news this week because it basically sequestered 1,500 tons of carbon, and it wasn't per day or per week, that was per year. And it's now been calculated that it was actually, putting out more carbon than it was sequestering, despite the fact that it had something like $800 million put into it and was selling carbon credits. So, I think this is one of those distortions or unintended consequences, is that there are a lot of projects out there that just don't work and shouldn't be funded, and are really a distraction in the big picture. Then coming back to this idea of what's called the iron law, it's that when you are confronted with economic growth or policies based on emissions reductions, ultimately, politically, it's economic growth that will win out every time. One pillar of that is regulation, which was mentioned earlier. There was a big report by Mario Draghi. The EU produces 4 times more rules than the US, and the US already has a lot of regulation. We are killing our companies, and I think this is a very pertinent point for Europe. The other examples from the UK, which is absolutely incredible, they're trying to build a railway line 8 kilometers from Bristol to Portishead. The report on it, the environmental report on it, was nearly 80,000 pages. And someone calculated that if you printed them out double-sided and you laid them down lengthwise, it would be much longer than the actual railway line. This is why things don't get built. Then there's the subject that's closest to my heart, is that the cost of energy is important. And I could spend a couple of hours talking about this, but I obviously won't today. But it's very pertinent. When people feel the cost of energy going up, they get poorer. They feel it on their heating bills, they feel it on their electricity bills, but what they don't feel is it actually drives inflation. One of the key drivers of inflation is the cost of energy, because everything has to be transported. The entire economy is energy manifest. So when you put a carbon tax on, it feels like a good thing to do, but you are basically making people poorer, and people don't like that. So what happens is the politics changes, and the Overton window is changing. One of this article that I've mentioned here I won't expect you to read it, but the point being is that all the climate protests we had in 2019, you would think that given what is happening in the US at the moment, with all of the climate and DEI and ESG being removed and repealed and pushed back on, there would be millions of people in the street protesting, and there isn't. There are no protests at all. The reason is people are concerned about cost of living, and because the political cycle has moved on. So on that happy thought, I'm just putting, why is it like this? Well, everything that makes energy more expensive, whether it's regulations, whether it is funding choices, when that happens, it makes people poorer, and people don't like that. The counter argument, of course, is, well, there's no economy on a burning planet. We can't just ignore this. And I think that's absolutely true. But I think from a political point of view, we have to think about the timing. Climate alarmism it's overpromised and underdelivered. People have been told that the end of the world is just around the corner over and over again, and it hasn't happened. It's not happening. And if you read the IPCC reports in detail, it's not going to happen. Even the low probability events are not going to happen for another 50 to 80 years. But there is immediate pain in the cost of living crisis all across Europe, in Canada, surprisingly, and to some extent in the US. That immediate pain creates unpopularity with the political classes, and it will drive, public opinion will drive the political debate. And I see that there are 3 paths ahead of us here. The first one is that we can have a rational debate on the energy trilemma, where there are trade-offs and there are no perfectly good solutions. And we have to have energy policy that's focused on affordability and reliability, not just on decarbonisation. If we don't do that, I think the backlash that we're starting to see and the rise of populism will increase, and there will be unintended consequences that we won't like. And I think the third way is that people carry on business as usual. And I think the UK, my home country, is probably doing this and is very kindly showing us the way of what not to do. They are doubling down on their renewable policy, and the UK is going into an economic death spiral. I've written about this in the past, but I won't belabor it here, but you can read about it in the press. So my predictions are, and I'm not sure if people are going to appreciate these, the European Corporate Social Reporting Directive and the Due Diligence Directives, these are going to be massively watered down. This is already starting to happen. The number of companies that are going to be captured by these is being reduced significantly because of essentially the work that Mario Draghi did that says that, you know, this will destroy European industry. The carbon border adjustment mechanism, there's been a lot of talk about this, a lot of excitement. It's worth remembering that the carbon border adjustment mechanism is a tariff. And remember how upset people got about America putting tariffs on trade tariffs. This is a tariff by any other means. And it's one that people don't seem to understand, is that it will make products more expensive for European consumers. Again, something people will not like. We're going to see EV mandates and internal combustion engine phase outs. These are going to be removed or delayed. I suspect carbon trading and carbon taxes will fade out. Canada has just killed off its retail carbon tax, although I suspect it will come back. It was enormously unpopular. And actually, Canada's inflation figures, which were out 2 days ago, dropped specifically because the carbon tax was removed, and people feel that. Then another subject I do a lot of research on is electricity grids. We saw a major outage in Spain. I think we're going to see another one at some point, which will be much more catastrophic. Spain was fantastic because they got the grid back up within 18 hours, which is almost unprecedented or almost unheard of. There is a potential when one of these goes down in parts of the US, in Germany or in the UK, that it could take a week or more to get back up. And that's when people will really understand that access to electricity is far more important than anything else, than literally anything else. I won't belabor high oil prices, but we're going to see them because as I say, the supply-demand equation has been distorted, and I'm absolutely sure we're going to see a massive renaissance of nuclear power. So, if I were to say one thing, ESG, as we've seen it in the last few years, it got too big, too strong, too influenced by activists, but it has real values and strengths. And those are, they control and moderate what are called the animal spirits of capitalism. If we didn't have it, we would have terrible outcomes as well. But most companies do this because it's part of the moral and the right thing to do. It's how you run a company properly, particularly on the G side, the governance side. The excessive zealotry, particularly around decarbonisation, coupled with unrealistic expectations, it has created a backlash against all of ESG, and I think that's very unfortunate. Good governance, environmental stewardship, and sustainability are still very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. It's, as usual, very interesting, the least to say from your analysis. I would give the word to some of our speakers before I address some other questions. Maybe Boyan or Marina would like.
He will start because he's happier than me.
Okay.
I'm happier because you know, Marina knows what I've been talking about in Bulgaria in the last several years. Richard, I could have done the same presentation with the same finish, practically. You know, even before CSRD came into force and CSDDD, I was talking publicly in Bulgaria that this will not work. Just because I knew what's the level, you know, and this goes too far. I personally expect that something in the European energy policy will change only after a major grid collapse in UK or Germany, specifically those two countries. And unfortunately, only after many people die. This is the reality. It's very interesting to see what happened in Spain and how politicians react on it. You know, they are so good in refusing to accept the reality. This is amazing what is happening. Anyway, and again, the fact that policy put a sign of equality between the idea of sustainability and decarbonization completely destroyed the meaning of sustainability, because it's much, much bigger than decarbonization. And decarbonization is actually absolutely not in the middle of it. So yeah, I don't know what to say more.
Maybe I can add several things because we were really publicly having this dialogue for 10 plus years.
Yeah, for ages.
Yeah, and this is good because we need to publicly speak about it. So I just have to put 3 reference points, not because I'm not agreeing with what was just presented on the as a personal, as an expert opinion, and then like statistics, also scenarios, because this is one of the lines we are listening all over these years, and the facts there are real facts. But some of the things which I would go further to develop and to discuss, because this is not black or white, and I believe that everybody knows this. First, that speaking about the companies, we have this very important issue. Speaking, when Boyan was speaking, one of the things which came to me was speaking how to survive as an individual company, because this is the individualistic approach of a company like itself. Then, and it is absolutely important. This is like the person or the society. You know, you cannot choose just to save the society and then just destroy even one person. So it should be both, if there is an opportunity for both. And I always strive to look for the best possible scenario, even like a vision. Maybe we will not get there, but just to imagine that it's possible, both the individual part to survive, but also the society, not on behalf of this. And then speaking about and listening what was presented just right now, it was again about what is the role of the business or the private sector within this society. Because we were speaking about stakeholders all the time. And when we speak about politicians, it's another stakeholder, which again is part of the society. So it is not on the same playground, and we cannot put it like being together, explaining to whom. When we speak about people are going to get poorer. Yeah, but they are also becoming more ill, and they are also dying, and not only from being poverty of energy. It is also the other risks. So going to this direction for me, when I was looking all this, how to say, development and putting the sustainability of society into the hands of the business, we were seeing, and what I was seeing in all this social experiment, if I say so, is that we are giving a chance for the most survival entity. For me, a business as an entity, legal entity, not the human entity, he has the best, not a state entity, not a non-governmental organization, because they have different tools to impact society or impact our development. He has the most, first they manage the capitals, not only one capital, not only financial. Then they have to manage the skills and the potential for innovation. And Boyan was speaking about grants, but grants are coming because you have 2 things, because public grants are coming and public money are invested just because of 2 reasons: to manage the current state, or to innovate something, to try on the behalf of the company, of society, to try something new. And then when it is working, then okay, so we can scale it up and we can put it into private finance and everything else. If not, at least we tried. So this is the innovation part. And innovation going to solve environmental and social issues, it's really crucial, because we need to put this DNA characteristics of the business for entrepreneurial skills. We don't have enough money to solve this huge problems. So this is where I see the role of the business. Speaking on the current state, of course, regulation cannot force the innovation. I mean, innovation doesn't come from regulation. Never. It was never been, and it won't be. But what we would like to see is this dialogue put in and explained over and over again to normal people and normal businesses, to educate them what is the real picture. And that's why I liked about the sentence about keep the perspective. What is the core issue of delivering this sustainability on individual level, which is the materiality, and we were discussing on the business model. We need these viable products and services, and they need to also be put another lens if possible to solve problems, environmental or social problems. And this would be the best opportunity or the biggest opportunity for humankind to be able to overcome, to adapt, or to go further with no, with no betraying their, as Boyan was saying, values. Because the values are not, values go to the business ethics, but these are human values and human rights. And this is also very, very important, not only speaking about being poor in values is also not a solution on that. So this was my reflection, because we are speaking for the same thing, and we are just both three of us, I believe, we are trying to find the real, some kind of a scenario that is the best scenario for the or the best recipe for development. And this is what most of the critically thinking part of the world and part of the business is doing really every day.
Yes, I take away what Boyan is saying, be sustainable, do what you need to do as a company. I take your word as takeaway, be cautious about the policy and everything around you. I think that all you and Richard, three of you, you're talking about different pillars of the sustainability development goals, because one part is the climate solutions, clean energy. One part of those goals are the zero hunger, good health, clean water, infrastructure, responsible consumption. So these are different pillars where the strategy can be addressed. And while maybe one of these pillars regarding the energy is a little bit messed currently, to put it in this way. And then let's say in long term, what energy strategy do you believe would best serve Europe in achieving both economic prosperity and environmental sustainability?
Is this to Richard or to me?
You can start, and then Richard, I'm sure he will address this.
I give you an example of what is now a European official policy, or also Bulgarian. The official policy of Bulgaria has one very interesting target. The target is to decrease final energy consumption in absolute terms by 10% between 2020 and 2030. Europe has a similar target for the European Union. Now, we live in times when it's very, very obvious that the geopolitical entity that has the energy makes the rules, and is able to produce something. This is China in reality. And China uses every single source of energy they can imagine, 200 to 120% of what they have. Now, and imagine in Europe, we have the target to decrease energy use. And at the same time, there is the development of artificial intelligence that uses so much energy, you can't imagine. We are talking about new energy users, single entities with gigawatt scale. So if we want to achieve our political goals, we will be out of this development. We cannot do it. Forget it. It will never happen. So what Europe needs to do is to throw away the current strategies and do exactly what the US is doing now. Unleash European energy to something like this. Because what the Trump strategy under Chris Wright is to mobilize everything America has in order to be competitive, in order to re-industrialize, because for industry you need lots of energy, any type of energy you can get. And Europe needs to do the same. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have the concept of good energy and bad energy, and we need to forget about it. We need to use every type of energy. There is a way to use gas, oil, coal, nuclear in a clean and safe way. That's it. This is my opinion. I guess Richard will be more or less on the same tone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. It's going to be very boring, so I won't repeat it. But I mean, I agree with you. I think I think we're going to see some extraordinary things in the next 20 years or so. I would, I've made this prediction before, but I think the UK is going to go back to using coal. They're destroying their North Sea oil and gas industry. They're going to become incredibly reliant on imported gas. And the problem with that is that essentially Europe is going to be competing for gas. If Europe goes ahead with the decision to actually no longer buy gas from Russia, not just shut the pipelines, because they shut the pipelines, but they've been importing gas by liquefied natural gas has been coming in. If the decision goes ahead to say we're not going to use Russian gas at all, it will have to be bought on the world market. And that means they're going to be competing with the Asian countries. Now, in the past, that hasn't been a problem because Europe was wealthy enough to sort of outbid those companies. And in the 2022 energy crisis, Pakistan had contracted LNG contracts with a couple of European companies who I won't necessarily name. But there was such a large arbitrage in the gas price when Europe decided it needed to buy gas at any price that those companies, they broke their contracts with Pakistan. They turned the ships around, sent them to Europe, paid an enormous penalty, hundreds of millions of dollars of penalty, and still made billions of dollars on the transactions. But that left Pakistan without gas. They had, this is the question of reliability. And businesses shut down, people lost their jobs. And the immediate reaction in Pakistan was say, well, we're going to go back to using coal. So that was a direct, impact of European energy policy as Pakistan's gone back to using a lot more coal. The point here being that in the future, Asia is getting much, much wealthier and will outbid Europe. So, this is a very serious problem that Europe has to think about. Now, the answer is, well, if gas is going to be so expensive and so volatile, we should have far more renewables. And, Germany has now got, I think, 300 gigawatts of solar and wind, and the UK is aiming to get a sort of 3 times what it actually needs. The problem there is you have to have two systems because you cannot have wind and solar running a modern industrial society because there are large periods of time where they don't work. And so you have to have on standby gas or coal or nuclear. And you have, a good example of this is, we were talking about this the other day at home, was that we have one car and it's a big car because I have 3 kids, 2 dogs, and I like to go away at the weekend. But most of my driving around town, I would be very happy to have an electric vehicle for 90% of my trips. But I don't want two vehicles. So the car I chose was for the edge case, which was the reliability and those needs. And in an energy system, if you want to have both, you're going to have the cost of 2 cars, which is more expensive than the cost of one. And that's how an energy system works. If you have renewables, you have to have backup and you have to pay for both. So renewable energy is never going to be cheaper. And I think that's where my comment on the nuclear renaissance, I think one of the sort of the hopes for Europe is they have finally decided that nuclear is actually low carbon. I mean, I don't know why it took 20 years to decide this. And it is now part of the energy mix. Belgium has just decided to not phase out their nuclear plants. Germany has changed its position. Denmark is changing its position. The problem here is going to be how do we build these quickly enough? Because the only one I think, well, not the only one, but the main one I know of being built in Europe is in the UK, and it's like 5 times over budget and 20 years late. And the reason that happens is because we don't build nuclear plants anymore. That's essentially an experimental design. The French did this brilliantly in the 1980s. They said you're going to have one design. It's going to be 600 megawatts, and if you want 300 megawatts, well, find somebody else to buy the other half. And if you want more than 600, build two. And they built out a whole fleet of nuclear power, which is basically keeping the lights on in the whole of Europe at the moment. So that's what needs to be done, is a Europe-wide policy to think very seriously about what can work in the long term. And honestly, I think it's going to be nuclear. All right, stop there.
Thanks. And what about role of technology? Do you think that battery storage can resolve some of the issues, at least having in mind that Bulgaria is announcing by 2026 10 gigawatts battery storage to be built?
Sorry, was that addressed to me, Desi?
Could be, and then we can have
No,
the
I've
answers.
just been speaking too long. I'll leave someone else to jump in on that.
Well, on battery, it's quite simple. It's a question of scale. So you could have batteries, of course. There are solar plants in Bulgaria that have also battery storage. However, the usual scale is these batteries, they can take up to 15 up to 20 minutes of the production of the solar plants, because that's the reality of the energy density of the current batteries. The energy density of the current battery technologies is about 15 times less than diesel in the same volume. So, the scale that you need to build in order to support the grid is enormous. People cannot imagine it. So that even the better technology is the pumped hydro that we have also in Bulgaria. We have very good. We have unfortunately a broken pumped hydro power plant that used to be the biggest on the Balkans. Now we have just one out of the 4 turbines working, but there are projects to build new pumped hydro, this is going to work, but again to a certain degree. And again, I'm saying, if we want to re-industrialize, if we want to be able to produce all these things that we are buying now from China, and to produce them from the refining of the metals to the final product, we need a lot more energy. And with artificial intelligence, we need even more energy, which can come only with nuclear in huge scale. But as Richard said, nuclear needs time. You cannot build it so fast. So the reality is that in Europe, I know it sounds very ugly, but Europe has lignite. Europe has, this is the biggest power source, energy source that Europe has, especially, Eastern Europe and Germany, and in Bulgaria. And that's why we still keep our lignite-fired power generation, which is very bad from decarbonization point of view, but this is what works. This is what we have. If we don't have own gas production, it should be, I really don't understand how a country like Germany can build its strategies on the assumption that there will be always cheap gas coming from somewhere, although they don't control it. They don't have the military capabilities of the US, to make somebody sell them gas. They actually have zero military capabilities. So, yeah.
Okay, so how has the rest of the world managed to navigate this energy policy more effectively? What are specific lessons do you think Europe should learn from the experience of other countries? Richard, it's you. If we are still on the energy.
Yeah, sorry, because I think Marina hasn't had a much moment to talk recently, but um, I think the comment about China was very interesting from Boyan earlier on, and it's true that China's held up as being the poster child of renewable energy, um, and it's clear that it has deployed more solar and probably more wind than the rest of the world combined in the last few years. And but there are multiple reasons for that. The one I would say that is least compelling is that they care about the climate. I think they do care about pollution, and they know that coal-fired power stations and smog in Beijing is a problem. But the other thing is they produce all of this stuff. So if they can't sell it on the world market, they can use it locally. And if they are selling it on the world market, there are economies of scale, which means it's very cheap to use locally. But I think the really interesting geopolitical angle is that despite the Three Gorges Dam, which is something like 22 gigawatts, it's absolutely massive, and their nuclear plants and their coal and all of it, they are now the world's biggest importer of oil and one of the world's biggest importers of gas. And as we were just saying about Germany, actually being an importer of these is a geopolitical, what's the word? It's a weak point. The US had this for many years. It was a massive importer of oil, hence its very large military presence in the Middle East to ensure that it could always get oil. China now is a very large importer of oil. Most of it comes from the Middle East and Africa, and all of it transits through the Malacca Straits. So when people are doing war games in the defense institutes and they're saying, what happens when China attacks Taiwan? What happens in almost every scenario is the American fleet gets wiped out because it's operating so far from base. So they know they can't defend Taiwan militarily. But the one thing they could do very quickly is shut down the Indian Ocean trade routes so that no oil gets to China. China, of course, has seen this coming. They've done two things. One of them is they've built a lot of renewable energy, so they are less reliant on oil, but still they're importing 11 million barrels a day. And the other one, of course, is that they have built an enormous stockpile. They have a strategic reserve, which would last them between 60 and 90 days at current usage. And if they were on a war footing, it would last them a lot longer. So there's an element around, we look at energy policy and we think that maybe all those renewables are driven by climate change. I'm absolutely sure they're not in China's case. I think they're driven by the geopolitical aspirations of reintegrating Taiwan and being less dependent on oil. The US has gone through the exact opposite situation where it's gone from being an energy importer to essentially an energy exporter. It still imports oil, but it's kind of a fudge at this point because what they import, they also export. And that's changed the politics. And you look at that and think, you wonder why the American fleets are now still navigating the Gulf, because essentially they're protecting the oil getting to China. They don't need to be there. It's a very strange scenario at this point. But I think there's a bigger question about global stability and having those fleets there. I wrote a paper a while ago which was typically very miserable and pessimistic, and I called it "The World in 2040." And it was kind of a reaction to a paper that had been written called The World in 2030, in which this is the famous one where everybody will have free energy and we won't own anything and we'll all be happy, and living in sort of 15-minute cities. And it was a thought piece, and it wasn't meant to be taken seriously, I don't think. But the idea that when energy is free, all these things will be able to happen is just so completely bonkers, because energy is never going to be free. What's happening is it's getting more expensive. And what that means is we're going to be competing for it more and more. And this comes down to this notion of where the growth is, where the people are, where the energy demand is. And all of that is in Asia. Here in North America, you could imagine if instead of sort of annexing Canada, we just had a decent trade agreement with the US, which we actually do. If America wants access to resources in Canada, they basically just have to ask nicely, and invest. The same with Mexico. Mexico, with its very young population and its very strong manufacturing base, combined with the resources and capital in the US and Canada, could be an entirely isolated, standalone economic island. At the same time, if that happened, Asia would have to start looking to get resources. And so places like Russia, which is already becoming a vassal state of China, the Middle East and Africa would be essentially there would be a race for resources, and the Asian economies would dominate that. And I think that's where the question comes back is, where does that leave Europe? It would leave it probably as a climate leader, but it would leave it extraordinarily isolated with very, very few natural resources at home. As you say, there's a fair amount of coal in Europe, but not much else. And competing with potentially very aggressive Asian countries. So I think Europe has to, at some point get a really big dose of reality about what the world is going to look like in 20 or 30 years' time. And unfortunately, that's, a final point I'd like to make, and this is true in all democratic countries, is that the democratic cycle of 4 or 5 years of terms does not create the stability that you need for making energy projects, because they all require 20, 30-year outlooks, whether it's a hydro dam, a nuclear plant, even very large oil fields. So we need to have leaders who can look beyond short-termism, but beyond what's going to get me elected, and think about what's good for the country and for the region in the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Thank you. This will go next to what Marina was saying, rather for the ESG and the strategy for the world. Maybe some concluding parts. We have one question here from the audience regarding why is the whole discussion on ESG topics focusing mainly on environment, when especially governance issues are much more important for the long-term company value creation?
Yeah, I will reflect on the things and then I will go to the question. Again, we were just having, I would say, a conversation or a discussion on two levels. So the first level was the individual perspective, and the second one was a little bit more global, nevertheless national or international, because now in this globalized world, we are all international. And I'm sorry for the people who don't understand it, because it comes faster and faster on national level. So you have to follow, if you want not to be surprised, to follow the international trends and to understand longer lifetime perspective, as Richard was saying, about 20, 30 years. It is the same, by the way, for the development of the human capital, because you cannot train a child to become an adult profession in green profession, whatever kind of innovative thinking or STEM, for 1 year or for 4 years, like elections. So if you want to have long-term strategies, they should be beyond politics, and it is about the energy, it is about the generations, and it is about also the climate change. The scenarios are coming to 2100. So we really need to have the long-term perspective on everything. And for me, when we were speaking, and we focused a little bit more on energy part, but competitiveness is not only energy, it is also people. And the people need to understand you cannot just leave behind the people and leave everything on the machine and rely for having rational decisions on the people. So if we just remove the people from the equation of taking decisions, or we will see autocracies, and we see them a lot, and we will see political systems which are really diminishing the role of the person to take decision, which are for their personal life, which was something we go for the social contract, and beyond, or I don't know, long ago or long in front, which is going to be after the Renaissance, because the Renaissance give the people the human dignity, the human rights, and the perspective of take decisions for their own destiny. And it is something which I believe we need to keep up, because we cannot, I don't want to live in a world where people are removed from the equation just because the system of energy or economy are working, and only people are satisfied without taking the real responsibility, the real life, of living their life, not like taking the charge or taking the responsibility of their actions and somebody else taking that. So for this, we need the education, was my main point. And going about the G part of the companies, I think that both in Europe, also in Bulgaria, we have a very strong regulation on the governance part of every company, especially for the larger companies. And this is, I believe it's enough for the regulation part, but who is implementing the governance? And then we go back to the human capital, because it is not to write the appropriate policy. This is, Boyan was saying something about Dieselgate, and it is the perfect example to be very good when we speak about reporting or the KPIs, and then going back and you see the corruption coming within the corporate culture and in the individual choices made several years before that, because you go slipping to the edge, from the edge of ethical and non-ethical, which comes to the human and it doesn't come to the system. So in my opinion, governance is enough. If we speak about regulation and regulatory requirements, we need to focus on how to live this government, how to make it alive, and people living it through the corporate culture, not corporate, but the culture, organizational level, and then going community level. It is also important. The solidarity is missing, and this is also not about digital connectivity. I'm speaking about solidarity of what is happening and how we react as one thing, and then going on national and globalized community. So this is the role of the person, in my opinion, and probably it's evolution as well.
Is this reflected in this research that you're going to publish?
No.
About the change in individual,
yes.
individual.
There are two researches. That's why I was, I was a little bit confused. So the one with the reporting, no, you could see the KPIs, but you cannot feel what is really, because the business models cannot be communicated if they are not, if the people who are making the money are not aware of the business modeling besides that, behind them, which is 90% of the whole reporting part, not being aware of what is the business modeling and where are the critical parts and how to make most of it or to change it if necessary. When we were speaking about sustainable consumption, yes, this is the second nationally representative study that we were just announced our results for a first time made in Bulgaria on this methodology, where we have the mindset, but also the knowledge and also the behavior patterns of the consumers and seeing what are the changes. And for me, it is really important to follow this trend, because I also still believe in the capacity of humans becoming the breaking point or the tipping point of their own, mess. So they are still the factor that we can empower if possible and equip with tools. Nevertheless, I'm not utopical, so it is not about this. It is about hard work and about convincing and about showing that it's possible to go beyond the limits. And it really requires a lot of efforts from everybody's, like the structures and educational system, the family unit as well, the community example as well. So this is, again, soft work that we need to do continuously. But these results are showing that consumption, just like Boyan said in the beginning, younger generation want to work in companies who are sustainable, who have their purpose, and they show it and they communicate it, and they make their money through achieving their purpose. The same is with the consumptions, with the consumers. They are the same driven people who, in other shoes, want to support this kind of higher purpose, that not only making money or just satisfying my customer need for a good quality for a lower price or the lowest price, which sometimes is contradicting for them as well, and they can see it. So for me, it is continuous efforts of evolution of the people in their various roles, like employees, but also owners and also management, which are different and many times, or consumers, or just good neighbors, to be able to to perform better in all these stakeholders roles. Yeah.
In all ways, ESG is already embedded in our lives. You mean in terms of consumption as a consumers, and the same is for corporates, and actually all kind of ESG events are impacting corporates as well, negative or positive, and they're impacting the price of the shares. They're impacting as well the price of the financial instruments, one way or another. So where we go from there, Boyan?
I'll come back to the question that was raised because it's a very fair question. Why do we speak about decarbonization when we speak about ESG? Yeah, it's mostly about decarbonization. I'll tell you why. Because the decarbonization push, first of all, is in the it's the fundament of the European Green Deal. Yeah, the big goal is net zero 2050, right? So, and the whole legislation related to sustainability is actually related to this big policy. Now, and the companies talk about decarbonization a lot because these are the expectations that are making them invest lots of money with no returns. So the decarbonization push in Europe, when I make more, closer presentations, not very public, I call this the biggest investment in history, the biggest investment mistake in history, because it leads companies to invest in something that gives you the lowest energy return on energy investment. Now, I need to explain this because this is a difficult concept. Richard understands it, I'm sure, but most of our audience will not understand it so easily. The idea is that you need to invest in sources of energy where with the least energy invested, you get a lot of return. Like nuclear gives you the highest return. Solar and wind, they give you a very low return. They give you a return that actually cannot sustain civilization. So, and that's why we are talking about decarbonization so much, because this is the pain point. This is really in every company, especially in big industry, companies that are energy intensive. This is the discussion. Everything else is, we'll solve it, no problem. Governance, it's, we know how to deal with it. Social issues, they know how to deal with it. Decarbonization is the big thing that is really painful.
Okay, thanks. Few words as a final. Richard, we have 1 or 2 minutes only.
I could go on for hours.
For sure, the topic is interesting and challenging, and the opportunities there we are missing. Our webinar was called Opportunities, Dilemmas or Opportunities.
Mostly dilemmas. No, I think the opportunities we need to think about those as well, and I agree. And I was thinking as we were hearing about that, one anecdote I had from a couple of years ago was I was working with a very large, multi-billion-dollar family office based in the US, and they were looking at doing some investments in oil and gas, and looking at various things in the Gulf of Mexico and Brazil and Canada. And at the end, they actually built a private oil company focused on the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf of America, as I should call it now, probably. But when it came to a discussion about whether they were going to invest in Brazil or Canada, they chose Brazil because they didn't like the political risk of Canada. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. So when you're thinking about how you attract investment into businesses, again, this notion of the political cycle and stability is very important. And I think the European Union is going to go through this process of having to change its position on a lot of things just because physics gets in the way. And it's going to make it even more difficult to invest in Europe. So, the opportunities, I think the real opportunity comes down to what I was saying earlier, is we need to get away from the more dogmatic, the more extreme positions on ESG that are pushed by activists, and for a long time were pushed by the media and were adopted by politicians because they thought they would win votes, and get back to the fundamentals, which is good governance, environmental stewardship, and sustainability in all the senses that Marina was talking about, and try and get away from the more dogmatic, more extreme positions, because those extreme positions alienate people.
Thank you, Richard. With that, I would like to close our webinar. You will find, I would like to thank you, our eminent speakers. It was really a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you very much. And I would invite our followers, CFA Society members and guests to follow the links with additional researches that we are going to publish as link to our website or after the webinar. And please stay tuned with other CFA Society Bulgaria initiatives that follow later on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody. Have a nice day. Bye.